Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, I'm privileged to have a very, very accomplished entrepreneur and a fellow YPO member, Nitish Mittersain, in our show. Nitish, welcome to the show.
Sure. Thank you, Ashutosh, for having me here.
Thank you. Nitish is the founder and managing director of Nazara Technologies, which is a gaming and sports media company. He has operations in 64 countries. His traditional family business is in textiles. He plays the saxophone, and as I mentioned a little while ago, he's a member of the YPO. So, Nitish, what would you say are three key milestones in your life or your career?
Yeah. No, I think one key milestone right at the start of my life was when my father, for some reason, decided to buy me a ZX Spectrum when I was 6 years old. And that, I believe, really put me down a path which I'm still traveling, right? So I think that was a key milestone for me right at the start of my journey. The second I would say is when I started Nazara when I was in college in Mumbai.
Mhm.
When I was about, I think, 19 years old that time, at the cusp of the dot-com boom in 99. So I think that was the second milestone for me.
Mhm.
And the third, I believe we are right on the cusp of it because the company goes public as the first gaming company to do its IPO in India later this month. So I'm hoping that will soon become my third milestone.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to your IPO. So, before I get into discussions on Nazara, what made you decide not to go in the family business and to take gaming as a career?
So I think, like I mentioned, at six, when my dad gave me the ZX Spectrum, I got completely engrossed into technology, computers. And I think after that, I never looked back. By the time I was in college, I was already thinking of tech businesses and what can I do around it. Gaming was my passion. I thought India could be a huge opportunity for gaming. It didn't exist as a market at that point of time,
Mhm.
but all basic logic pointed to a fact that being a big country, a young country,
Mhm.
at some point of time, gaming would become large.
Mhm.
And keeping that in mind, I just about started it.
Very interesting. So let's now talk a little bit about Nazara Technologies. Tell me about what you do here. So Nitish, let's talk about Nazara Technologies. For all our viewers and listeners, tell me about what Nazara Technologies does.
So Nazara is a diversified gaming and sports media platform. We have about 50 million users a month currently accessing the network. And we have different verticals that we operate in within the overall gaming and sports media space. So to give you an example, whether it's casual mobile games, today in India, there are hundreds of millions of users with Android phones. So that's a big consumer market that we can access.
Correct.
Whether it is the esports space, which is becoming very, exciting, we operate in that. We operate in the sports simulation space. We own a franchise called World Cricket Championship, which is the most popular cricket game in the world.
Correct.
We own Kidopia, which is an extremely popular gamified early learning app for kids in the age of 2 to 7. It's a top 5 app in the US.
Wow.
So there are a bunch of diversified businesses that we operate in India as well as the US and other emerging markets. We operate in about 50 plus countries, including the Middle East, Africa. So the business has evolved over a period of time. Like I said, I set up the company in 99. We pivoted and we evolved over a period of time. But I really believe that this decade that we are in is really the decade of gaming for India, where gaming is going to become much larger than almost all other entertainment forms or entertainment modes put together. Whether you talk about the Indian movie industry or the OTT players, etc. As is in the US, etc. I think even in India, gaming is going to become a much larger industry this decade. Really,
So,
that's what we're going after.
no, you're absolutely right, and it's so fascinating. But tell me, you said you pivoted. What did you start off as, and then what did you move into?
Sure. So, right in the beginning, we actually mobile phones didn't even exist, data capable phones when I started 99 2000. So we were more of an online destination for Indian thematic based gaming.
Okay.
So it was more casual games which you could log in online on Nazara.com. But in the early years, we found that difficult to monetize. And as the mobile phones came in, your Android devices started coming in, we kind of pivoted there and started focusing on businesses around mobile phones. And that was a very important pivot for us because India was, has been a mobile first gaming country. Because of the lack of penetration at homes of, let's say, PCs or consoles, the real gaming took off only when the mobile phone revolution happened in India. So it was good that we pivoted at the right time into that segment because that has allowed us to grow and scale up.
Right. Very interesting. So when you were scaling up,
Yeah,
one of the problems that most startups face
yeah,
is that they are not able to scale up well.
yeah,
You've scaled up globally. What were some of your challenges?
yeah. So I think we had the luxury of taking our own sweet time to figure things out, and that allowed us to face challenges, figure out a way around them, and move ahead. So I can cite a couple of examples, maybe. Right in the 2000 when I started the company, the dot com crash happened,
Correct.
and 2 3 years was a big struggle in terms of getting revenues or financially sustaining yourself. But in 2004, we kind of thought that we were building these cricket games, and I thought that why not get an endorsement by Sachin Tendulkar and put him into the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll share a story there, right?
Yeah.
So I reached out to his agents, and 6 months later, I was sitting in Sachin's home trying to do a deal with him, and he really loved the concept. All credit to him. He got it that it would be a great youth connect. Then he told me, that his endorsement fees those days used to run at $1 million a year, and that's what he told me to pay. At that point of time, I could afford $10,000 a year,
Okay.
and that's what I offered.
Huh.
We struck a deal somewhere close to $30,000 a year, I think.
Mm.
So I think a lot of such ways where we kind of punched above our weight and managed to get through, which normally in theory would not be practical, allowed us to keep growing. I think the other thing is the early years taught us, unlike many startups or many tech startups, the early years taught us that if we had to sustain ourselves, we had to focus a lot on cash flows and profitable businesses and not chase only vanity metrics. I think that became ingrained in the DNA of the company. The other thing that became ingrained was, in tech businesses, especially new tech businesses, it's very easy to get fascinated or enamored by the new technology,
Correct.
and just focus on what's the cool thing that you're doing, other than is it also going to make me some money, right? And I always tell my team that let's be cutting edge, but let's stand one step behind the cutting edge. Because right at the cutting edge, you will be bleeding profusely, and I think that's what we practiced also. So we've kind of been pragmatic when it comes to doing new technology, but also with having a business cap on. I think the third thing, Ashutosh, I learned, once I saw a documentary when I was in college on Muhammad Ali. And there was this one phrase that really stuck to me, which is float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. I don't
Yes.
know why it stuck to me, but it stuck to me, and I kept thinking about it. And then I actually incorporated a lot of my own derived meanings out of this quote into my business. And just to talk a bit more about that, right? Float like a butterfly for me meant I need to be extremely light. And to be extremely light, I said, I'm going to stay completely away from debt because debt is heavy and it will weigh me down.
Correct.
I'm going to stay completely away from litigation because litigation will entangle me and I will never be able to float like a butterfly. I will remain very asset light type of business because again that will allow me to float. So these are the ways I kind of incorporated that into my own business,
Fabulous.
and actually it's paid off very well for me over the years.
Amazing. You're much younger than me, but I remember Muhammad Ali's this comment and also his song. I mean, the same, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a." It's a very powerful line.
Yeah,
So, Nitish, the gaming business, whatever little I know of it, uh, people can keep moving from one game to the other.
yeah,
What are some of the major changes the gaming business faces across the whole world?
yeah. Yeah, so I think, as you said, consumer preferences keep changing, technology keeps changing, and as the technology moves, what the consumer wants to consume in terms of gaming entertainment significantly changes. It's not easy for one game or one developer to straddle across platforms, across these technology shifts. And that's why you see a lot of companies and a lot of game developers become one hit wonders, right? And some very big names. I mean, Angry Birds is a classic example,
Absolutely.
which became so big and made billions of dollars, but they were really not able to follow it up with a new franchise that was equally as popular. I think that's one thing that you have to always contend with. And I think moving consumer preferences in markets like India, you have global competition because the Indian consumer has access to everything, right? He can download a local game or he can download an American game. It's all available freely to him. I think there's heavy competition. Barriers of entry are low, and these are the things I think a lot of businesses content, but we also content in the gaming business. I think from an India market perspective, also. Uh, Traditionally the kind of talent that has been available in India has not been so steeped in gaming culture. So you're a bit at a disadvantage as an Indian developer compared to let's say some of the global developers, some of the Chinese developers. But that's changing very fast. I've seen in the last few years the talent pool in India increased significantly, and now Indian companies are able to compete actually at the global landscape.
Okay. And is language an important factor in this or not really?
No, it depends on market to market. So India is a fairly open country. I think language today is not a big barrier for games to come in. It may give you a cultural edge, especially if they're more mass market games, go into the roots of India, the depths of India, but not so much. If you go to markets like China, culturally, language becomes far more important to make sure your game is in the local Chinese language.
Okay. Okay. Again, you mentioned, that one of the things that you established very early that you will stay just one step behind the technology.
Yeah.
But technology is continuously changing.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have to keep innovating to stay ahead of the technology curve all the time. How do you manage to do that?
Yeah, I think so. That too. I think what I really meant was we stay one step behind the technology curve at the cutting edge of technology
Okay.
from a business perspective. So we have a R&D department that will keep doing innovation and new technology and staying one step ahead of, hopefully staying one step ahead of the cutting edge of technology also. But as a business, we tend to focus our energies on making sure that the business we are doing is also monetizable. Let me give an example: virtual reality, right? VR has been spoken about for many years, right, as the next big thing in gaming. And the reality is, it is the next big thing in gaming. It will disrupt gaming like nothing has ever before. So it will completely put you inside the game, right? But if I had started focusing the entire business on VR 5 years back, I would be standing today and not having monetized much.
Well said.
So I think that's so I could have a small team doing experiments in VR. But if I say I want to get into the business of VR, I want to set up a big setup, today when the monetization is not happening.
Very well said.
It's about timing.
Very well said.
Yeah.
So, moving on, you built this into an incredible company which is now preparing or ready for its IPO. What are some of the core values you believe in?
Few I already spoke about, which is we are very averse to debt. Uh, we are very averse to litigation, and I'm happy to say in the last 20 years of our existence, we have zero history of litigation.
Okay.
And I think that's from a belief that I personally have that the time spent in negative energy, even if half that time is spent in doing something positive, will probably in the longer period progress a lot more.
Okay.
And that's why we try and stay away from stuff like litigation as much as we can. I think being asset light has been important for us as a business, because in technology businesses it allows you to kind of be flexible, adapt, and move faster. I think the other thing as a company I've always tried to myself do and also tell my team is always wake up in the morning and have the confidence to see yourself in the mirror and see the truth, right? So in business, you need. I mean, today we can think we're the first gaming company, we're going IPO and get all full about it. But in our businesses, things change very fast, and unless your feet are firmly planted on the ground, you can have a rude awakening.
Mm.
And I think being very mindful of that
Mm.
for us as individuals working in the company and the company itself is extremely important, I think.
Well said. Well
I
said.
think these are the few things we tend to be mindful of.
And you must be leading a large team of young people.
Right.
What is your leadership style?
Yeah. I think it's fairly decentralized. We try and empower them. Although I do still, after so many years, also have the weakness of sometimes becoming a micromanager
Mhm.
and getting into too much detail.
Mhm.
I've tried to improve on that, but it doesn't happen.
Mhm.
But I try to be as decentralized. Today, the structure we have actually what we call a Friends of Nazara network. So within our group, we've acquired almost 13, 14 companies that operate independently
Mhm.
by their own founders and management teams.
Mhm.
And those we completely empower them. So we give full operational freedom
Mhm.
and trust them to do the right thing
Mhm.
while trying to add value wherever we can. I think that's a kind of structure we're really working with today.
Very interesting. So let's move to the next segment of our conversation, which is some questions for you as a startup entrepreneur, because we've got thousands of young people who will now look at
Yeah,
you and
sure.
learn. So my first question to you is, what are some of the basic mistakes a lot of startup entrepreneurs make?
Yeah. I think one is having the ambition to get rich very fast. I think rather than focusing on the business, if you start up with the thought that I'll make $100 million in 2 years, I think that's the approach. I think we need to first focus on what is the product or what is
Correct.
that we're really trying to do, rather than just chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I think second is perseverance, and I'm speaking from my own experiences, right? As of mistakes that I've made, right? I think perseverance, and I got taught those lessons early in life, luckily. But I think it's very easy to lose faith in anything you try, and then keep shifting to something other, something other. I think focusing and try, sometimes persevering more than what's looks logical
Mhm.
can actually lead you to the treasure.
Okay.
And for us, for example, in the early years, right from 2000 to as much as 2007, gaming was always a mirage. It always looked like, the next year gaming will take off in India, and the next year would arrive and it would be nowhere. And then you would think, maybe next year is going to take off.
Right.
So we persevered. Maybe we didn't have much options also,
Mm.
so we persevered. But that's allowed us to today become the first gaming company to go public in India. But many times I felt that maybe I'm just chasing the wrong path
Mm.
in the early years, and I could have got out of it,
Very
then
interesting.
we wouldn't be here. So I think that's the second thing. I think the third thing is chasing vanity metrics. When I started, the .com was all about page views and how many users you get and all of that,
Mm.
with no head or tail about business model.
Mm.
And I realized that when the music stops playing, then chasing these vanity metrics can be very dangerous. Put in context to today's consumer-based tech businesses, I think it's very important for startup founders to ensure that the product LTV and CAC, the lifetime value and the cost of acquisition they're acquiring, those key equations are well settled before you really try to scale up in terms of user base and revenues. But otherwise, you're just burning a lot of money and being dependent on VCs.
Mm.
The last thing I want to share is uh, be more possessive about the equity in your company.
Mm.
I diluted a lot at an early stage, which today I regret.
Mm.
Uh, and I think if startup founders can find ways to monetize
Mm.
and create revenues on which they can grow,
Mm.
rather than just take the first check that comes in from an investor, is also a good thing from a long term perspective. It might be a slightly tougher road to follow, but that might be very useful in the longer term.
Very, very good advice. I mean, I'm sure everyone who's going to listen to you will learn a lot from this. So, Nitish, I've got time for maybe three questions for you personally, which is the last segment of
Sure.
the conversation. As you look back from where you stand, having built an amazing gaming company and doing amazing things, what does success mean to you today?
Sure. It's unfortunate, but I don't find myself, or I don't think of myself as successful. I'm always very restless in terms of where I am. And I always have the feeling that I'm missing out on what I could have achieved or what I could have been. So honestly, to me, it means nothing in that sense.
And a follow-up question from that is, who or what inspires you? I know when I was reading about you, you said your grandfather inspired you a lot.
Sure. Of course. So my grandfather, he was an eminent cardiologist, Dr. B.K. Goyal, one of the only doctors to be awarded all the three Padma Awards.
Wow.
Uh, so I grew up looking at him, and I think the biggest inspiration I drew from him was not his success, but his humbleness, his positivity, and his the love and the affection that he had, despite being so successful. And I think that was something that really inspired me. I saw that also with my mentor, Shami Kapoor, the legendary actor Shami Kapoor, who was my mentor for over 2 decades. I saw very similar characteristics in terms of the positivity they emanated. I think those were great learnings for me.
Amazing. So my next question to you is on failure. And I've often said
Yeah.
people in India or South Asia don't teach children it's okay to fail. And yet we keep
Yeah.
failing all the time. So my question to you is, what has been some of your biggest learnings from some of your mistakes?
So I think we covered some of it. It might get a bit repetitive, but I think for me, one of the biggest learnings was in the early years when I was doing Nazara.com, chasing page views and vanity metrics. I lost a lot of money, and then I realized that it was a big struggle for me. I often joke to a lot of people that I originally had thought of going and doing an MBA in the US, in Harvard or wherever, because I started my company while studying it in college. That never happened, but I probably did a far more expensive and far more enriching MBA sitting right here in Mumbai, right? By learning those lessons at that point of time. So I think being very pragmatic about what you're trying to do was important. At one point of time, I got swayed by the dot com boom, and I had to pay for that. So I think you have to learn from your failures. And my biggest learning is, as a famous Johnny Walker slogan says, right, keep walking. As long as you stand up and you keep moving ahead, you will get somewhere.
Nice. Very interesting. Nitish, thank you so much. Examples you gave are really, really valuable. Thank you again, and I wish you lots of success for your IPO.
My pleasure, Shutosh. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.